Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. Today is day 579. The updates every day are just so robust. I'm sorry that they're taking much longer than 10 minutes, and I will try to keep it as concise as possible while giving you valuable information and offering encouragement as we seek to call for a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire that is so desperately needed. Starting with the U.S. yesterday, the Trump administration announced that the Office of Palestinian Affairs, this is called OPA. OPA was essentially what the U.S. consulate to the Palestinians was downgraded as under the first Trump administration. OPA is going to be closed and merged into the U.S. Embassy in Israel. Currently, OPA is the highest ranking U.S. office that relates to the Palestinians. Since it's going to be closed, it means that Palestinians, the state of Palestine, Palestinians who are individuals, will have to go to the U.S. Embassy in Israel, which is quite significant. So that was announced on Tuesday. Yesterday, a State Department spokesperson, Bruce, said that U.S. Secretary of State Rubio decided to end the Office of Palestinian Affairs, known as OPA, in an independent status and to make it an office within the embassy. Taking us yet again further away from a two-state solution, which most people have said is dead anyway. U.S. Democrats urge Israel to resume shipments of humanitarian aid into Gaza immediately. 94 House Democrats urged Israel to immediately resume shipments of aid to Gaza, saying that the blockade is strategically counterproductive and will only hurt Israel's international standing and long-term security. I didn't read the whole letter, but of course it will also kill dozens of Palestinians to not resume aid. They also said in the letter, we implore your government to resume the flow of aid to Gaza. We reiterate our support for a renewed ceasefire and hostage release deal to finally end this war. The only option is to alleviate the suffering of both Israelis and Palestinians. Campus protests have continued, and today it was quite significant. Police were dispatched in New York after pro-Palestinian students occupied Columbia University Library. The New York mayor announced that pro-Palestinian Columbia students occupied the university's library today. They said that they will stay there through the end of the school year, which is coming up very quickly. This marks the first significant disruption since March at Columbia, when the interim president, Katrina Armstrong, stepped down amid backlash over the university's response to pro-Palestinian protests. One of the board of trustees co-chair took over as acting president. I was just in conversation with a rabbi, I might have shared this with you already, who shared about an experience where his daughter, Jewish, attends a U.S. university, and she was locked in a building. And this was months ago, but she was locked in a building where protests were taking place. And she called him, and he said that he was so afraid, that the situation was masked students who locked the doors and demanded that the students participate in a mandatory Palestinian teach-in. And this, taking over of buildings and some of these actions, they are certainly not, they are not nonviolent. And I just wanted to acknowledge that there is significant Jewish fear on campuses. There are anti-Semitic aspects to certain protests. I've been very supportive of university students who have non-violently used their democratic right of free speech, using their voices and their actions constructively and in non-violent ways. But taking over buildings, holding students against their will, that's not nonviolent. And I think it's really important to know that it also perpetuates feelings of fear and insecurity within the Jewish community. There have been numerous reports about Jewish students not being allowed to go to class because protesters, will identify them as Zionists or harass them. And so a lot of Jewish students, and I've talked to a lot of Jewish parents, have said that their children don't feel safe. And so might all students and all in the United States feel safe, be they Muslim, Jewish, Palestinian, or Israeli? I know that these communities under this current administration are not the only that are vulnerable. And might students use their voices courageously in ways that are non-violent, effective, and constructive, rather than causing further division and causing harm. At the same time, Jewish students who support Palestinian rights and have been involved in protests at Columbia University came to Congress this past week to tell U.S. lawmakers that accusations of anti-Semitism have been weaponized. Both are true. They say that pro-Palestinian activism is driven by their faith. These Jewish students say they've been left out of mainstream narratives about anti-Semitism on college campuses. They met with at least 17 Democratic legislators from both the House and the Senate. Now, shifting gears, Trump plans to announce that the U.S. is going to start referring to the Persian Gulf as the Arabian Gulf or the Gulf of Arabia. He plans to announce that this week when he's visiting Saudi Arabia. Arab nations have pushed for this change on the body of water's name. Iran has emphasized its historic ties to the Gulf. In Syria, the president Ahmed al-Shara confirmed the country has had indirect talks with Israel to calm the situation as Israeli strikes have continued to target Syria. And the UAE, United Arab Emirates, set up a back channel for talks between Israel and Syria, so they've been a part of that. And then related to Iran, the U.S. Vice President Vance said that the Iran talks are, quote, so far so good, and that Iran could keep nuclear for civilian purposes, just not as a weapon. There's a lot of news related to Yemen. This is very, very significant. I wanted to start just with a little history of the last day or two. The Israeli military has fully disabled Yemen's main airport in its Houthi-controlled Sana'a capital after the strikes that happened there yesterday. That's according to the IDF. And the U.S., here's the big news, has reached a ceasefire deal. The U.S. reached a truce with Houthi rebels, and the U.S. has said we're suspending airstrikes against Houthis. It's effective immediately. Trump said yesterday that the militants capitulated and would no longer target ships navigating the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. Trump and Oman, who said that they helped mediate the truce, did not specify, does this refer to all vessels or only U.S. vessels? U.S. and Houthi officials suggested the ceasefire does not extend to Houthi attacks against Israel. So the U.S., it looks like, brokered a deal with the Houthis and did not include Israel. Trump said about the deal, we had a good outcome. We honor their word. They made a commitment. We'll see what happens. But I believe hopefully it's over and they will leave ships alone. He also said we hit them hard. They had a great capacity to withstand punishment. You could say there's a lot of bravery there. It's amazing what they took. So that was Trump speaking about the Houthis, who were just redesignated as a terrorist group, according to the Trump administration. According to Vox, they said about the deal that there are only verbal statements, but we know that the U.S. has agreed to stop bombing, and we know that the Houthis have agreed to stop shooting at U.S. ships. But for other ships in the Red Sea, it's unclear. The Houthis haven't actually attacked container ships on the Red Sea since December, well before the latest round of bombing began. But shipping companies are going to want more assurance before they resume the full use of the Red Sea. This, of course, affects Egypt's economy because of the Suez Canal. Now, as Trump was negotiating around Yemen, another $60 million F-A-18 Super Hornet fighter jet from the USS Harry Truman aircraft carrier was lost in the Red Sea. The causes of the accident are unclear. The jet pilot and weapons system officer were rescued. They had minor injuries. The U.S. Navy lost another jet from that carrier last week. I gave that in my update. And so that's news about U.S. military near Yemen. Israeli news reported today in Haaretz that the Houthis have said that they are going to continue their missile launches on Israel, and they're going to continue to attack other vessels in the Red Sea until the aggression against Gaza stops and the blockade is lifted. Houthis also have said they will continue to ban air traffic into Israel until Israel's blockade on Gaza is lifted. In terms of hostages and a ceasefire agreement, Netanyahu said today there are 21 hostages confirmed to be alive. There are 3 more that they are uncertain about. I have not heard confirmation of life about Adan Alexander, the U.S. hostage, since Israel bombed that area where he was known to be a couple of weeks ago. He is believed, Adan Alexander, to be the only U.S. hostage left alive. In Israel, 1 person was moderately injured in a combined ramming and stabbing attack in Mount Hermon. The attacker was shot. And according to British media, Iranian terror suspects who planned an attack on the Israeli embassy in London were arrested. 5 Iranian nationals were arrested by the UK counterterrorism police. This was over the weekend. It said that they were planning a terror attack against the Israeli embassy in London, and that an attack on Kensington property was imminent. An Israeli drone killed 1 person in South Lebanon today. Security officials at the scene said the victim was a Hamas member. And the Netherlands is insisting on a review of the EU pact that governs trade ties with Israel, following Israel's actions in Gaza. Also, 55 international organizations that operate in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories signed a letter that protests Israel's new registration system for international NGOs. They accuse the rules of appearing designed to assert control over independent humanitarian development and peace-building organizations and to silence advocacy. Based on international law, and that they're further entrenching Israeli control over Palestinian territories. Speaking of the occupied Palestinian territories, in the West Bank, IDF said 2 reserve soldiers were seriously wounded in a shooting attack that happened earlier today, and I haven't even started talking about Gaza. A report came out today that told us something we already knew to be true. The former Biden administration, their attempt to build that ridiculous offshore pier and floating causeway for aid delivery in Gaza caused dozens of injuries to U.S. personnel, and it resulted in tens of millions of dollars in equipment damage. This was a report that was released this week from the Defense Department Inspector General. The World Health Kitchen The World Central Kitchen says that it halted its work in Gaza. It has run out of supplies and stopped its operations in Gaza today. They said their work can't continue until aid is allowed to enter. An Israeli strike on a school compound that was sheltering thousands of displaced people in central Gaza yesterday killed 22 people, including 7 children. Dozens were injured. The IDF said they struck terrorists who were operating within a Hamas command and control center. We hear that whenever there are dozens of deaths, it does not justify the killing of civilians. Earlier today, there was an Israeli strike on a restaurant in Gaza City. The death toll in that attack rose to 33 people, 86 people wounded. The total death time at that time of day was 89 Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip. But by tonight, the report is that 107 Palestinians have been killed today since this morning. 107 Palestinians killed today. How long? How long? Be sure, if you've not taken our action alert calling for an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire, that you do so. You can find that on CMEP's webpage. Our work is so critical right now to demand that these atrocities be brought to an end. Palestinians are so desperate in Gaza that they're turning plastic into diesel amid a fuel shortage. Food has to be cooked. I mean, there's very, very little food. And what's there, there's this major fuel crisis. And there's not wood, there's not supplies. And so plastic is being burned to keep essential services running. This is dangerous to humans and to vehicles alike. An Israeli member of the Knesset said that Israel is preparing for a major event of destruction and displacement in Gaza. It's almost like I don't even know how to read that and say they're planning a major event, as if every day there have not been major events of destruction and displacement. So when that is being said by lawmakers in Israel, that's so scary about what might be ahead. So we have to continue to pray and continue to work. The U.S. and Israel have discussed, listen to this, this is really big news. The U.S. and Israel have discussed the possibility of Washington, the United States, leading a post-war administration temporarily of Gaza. The U.S. and Israel have discussed the possibility of Washington leading a temporary post-war administration in Gaza. What's this mean? It means that a transitional government that would be headed by an American would oversee Gaza until it's been demilitarized and stabilized, and until a viable Palestinian administration has emerged. This is according to sources. Preliminary discussions suggest there's no timeline for how long it would last. It would depend on the situation on the ground. Sources compared the proposal to the Coalition Provisional Authority in Iraq that was established by the U.S. in 2003. This was after the U.S.-led invasion that toppled Saddam Hussein. May I just say, have we not learned anything? Our presence in Iraq, I mean, I'll stop there. I'm not being constructive, but this is just unbelievable that this is even being considered, that the U.S. Would play this role. You know, the authority in Iraq was perceived by Iraqis as an occupying force, and it transferred power to an interim Iraqi government in 2004 after failing to contain a growing insurgency. In other words, it failed when we did it before, but we're talking about trying it again. Other countries would be invited to take part. In this U.S.-led authority in Gaza, sources say the administration would draw on Palestinian technocrats that would exclude Islamic groups like Hamas and the PA. The Palestinian Authority being identified as an Islamist group. I'm like, oh, like what world are we living in? Also, the Middle East envoy Witkoff is presenting a plan from the United States for supplying aid to Gaza to the UN Security Council. This is happening behind the scenes at the UN. The organization said that adopting the plan will lead to large parts of the Gaza Strip. I'm sorry, the plan that the UN rejected was proposed by Israel, and they said that this would lead to large parts of the Gaza Strip where people are less mobile and more vulnerable being without aid. But Witkoff behind the scenes is presenting to the UN. And Donald Trump in the Oval Office today said that we should expect new developments related to Gaza within the next 24 hours. God have mercy. May it be good news, and may it not be nonsense about the United States occupying the Gaza Strip. A closing word. Today, Cardinal electors cast their very first votes in the process to seek to elect the new Pope. The smoke tonight was black, coming from the conclave of cardinals. May we pray for peace wherever there's war and wherever there is violence and suffering. I'll close with a quote that I heard today that offered me some encouragement from Helen Keller. You know, I read her autobiography as a little girl, and I was so incredibly inspired. Blind and deaf from an illness at 19 months old, she overcame so much in her life with the help of her teacher, Anne Sullivan. Keller made significant progress in communicating. She graduated cum laude from Radcliffe in 1904. She became a renowned author and speaker advocating for blind and deaf communities. She was the first blind and deaf person to ever graduate from college, which is amazing. Here is the quote: "Although the world is full of suffering, it is also overcoming it." So said Helen Keller. May it be so. In the name of Christ, amen.